Oh no, you kind of hear about this thing about the PMP exam getting ready to change, and we got to go ahead and take the test like now, or after July, 2026. The world's going to come to an end. Well, what should I do? You know what? Let's dig into that a little bit deeper, and let's try to get to the better understanding of what those changes could or could not mean for you. Welcome back to another episode of John the PM, where we believe that managing projects is not just a job, but a way of life. So let's back up a couple of steps. Just a few minutes ago, I was kind of stating that the PMP exam is going to be changing. I, I've seen a lot of news about it, on the social media and so forth. And there's usually, several camps. Some people say, "Oh, go ahead and take the PMP exam before it changes. It's going to become harder." Other people say, "Oh, wait until after the change, and then wait 6 months and wait until it settles in all those areas." Hey, I tell you what, this is my stance. This is my perspective, just my point of view. It doesn't matter. You either know the material or you don't. Now, if you're part of my classes, it's usually not that big of an issue. Why? Because you really shouldn't just learn something in a sense of rote memorization. I'm not saying that there aren't times when rote memorization is not a good thing. So for example, RAM, responsibility assignment matrix, and, perhaps you memorize RACI, responsible, accountable, consulting, informed. Okay. So, just as an example, you can't have rote memorization for that. And it does help. However, what I would surmise is that you really should understand the underlying principles, the concepts, the philosophy of why you do something, of how you do it. Then you should back it up with practical application. I can almost guarantee that if you actually look at your studying from that perspective, then it won't really matter about the actual test. And then furthermore, your job performance actually increases. Too many times I see where they'll come back to me and they'll say, "John, I got 6,000 things to memorize." And I think about it, I say, why are you trying to memorize it all? You shouldn't try to memorize, you should try to learn it. There is a distinct difference. And I can always tell the people who memorized everything. Usually, they're the individuals that when they get to the actual job site, they actually don't ever use it. Why? When I say it, the material. Because they actually never learned it. So I would encourage you to not to try to memorize everything, but rather to learn it, understand it, dig into it, and then most importantly, actually use it. So just a couple more examples here. Then I'll kind of get off my soapbox, on these pieces. Over the weekend, I was with a social group and they had a whole bunch of presentations and things of this nature. One gentleman did an outstanding job on his presentation. You know why? Because he actually understood what every slide was, not just the memorization, not just the words that were on it, but the underlying context of how they got there. And he was able to articulate it to the audience in such a way that it brought the slides to life. In other words, he wasn't just reading the material, he wasn't just citing the material, he was actually bringing an understanding to the material. Hey, you know what? Let's go back to school since I'm even thinking about this even more. A lot of times people go through, college, education, things of that nature. They'll go through 4 years. What they've essentially did a lot of times is that they memorized everything and then right after school they dump it. Sometimes we'll call it spec and dump. You know what? They probably don't even recall precisely what it was, 3, 5, 10 years later. Contrast that with individuals who actually study the material, who actually understand what is happening. They actually know it. And you know what? They're able to recall 3 to 5 years later the material. Hey, you know what? Enough is enough. Here's the bottom line. Don't try to memorize the material. Just really try to learn it, understand it, and apply it to your daily life. Things will go much, much easier. Relative to the changes, and you know what? There are a little bit more focus on business environment, but that actually kind of mates back what I've always kind of, presented to my students. I want the project manager, I want the project leader, I want you to actually have a seat at the table. Why? Because that is the where you ought to be so that you can understand the strategic nature of your project. The other two processes, I've already kind of talked about processes. Your job as a project manager is to know all the processes and when to use them and how to explain it. In some regards, you become like a trainer. And then, of course, people. We are in the people business, so that is just a constant battle of really trying to understand. You know what? I've been through this since the fourth edition, the fifth edition, the sixth edition, the seventh edition, the eighth edition. The PMBOT, PMI. They do change. And rightfully so. Do change the editions. Why? Because we have new information. The world kind of changes. The nature, complexity, size, operations, are altered. So our material has to kind of reflect that. So that's a good thing. And so there's a test. Conditions are not exactly the same as they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. In fact, maybe even 4 years ago, 5 years ago, with the advent of technology, especially in AI. So, again, bottom line, don't worry about the changes on that. Just study and learn the material, use it each and every day, and believe me, you will do just fine. All right, well, that's another episode of John the PM. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. It helps us to be back of service to you and make all of your projects be highly successful.